You're listening to Part 3 of the Disappearance of Belinda Van Lith. This episode contains details related to heinous crimes. It is not suitable for children's ears. Please take care while listening.
She was very outgoing. She was very beautiful always. She was a very popular girl, very athletic, and she loved gardening. She had it made at home. She had nothing to run away from.
If they were doing stuff like that, more people should have known, because
The family should have known first.
I firmly believe that the more people that know information, somebody saw something somewhere, and whether it was a critical piece of information, it might have led to a critical piece of information.
I do stupid things when I was younger, yeah. Did I understand why I was doing them? No.
Did you kill Belinda? Did you kidnap her or have anything to do with her going missing? One year after Timothy Crosby was released from St. Peter Hospital's intensive treatment program for sexual aggressiveness, he was arrested for kidnapping another woman. On April 25, 1983, Timothy Crosby went back to the same area where he picked up his previous victim and attempted to commit the same crime. He offered the victim a ride and she accepted. At first, Timothy Crosby was following the route to Beeline Foods, just as his passenger requested. But then they got a little lost. So she pulled out the map on the dash of his car to check things out. And that is when she felt the knife to her side. He told her to put her head between her legs and her hands behind her back. This time, he said he was after her money. She told him she didn't have any, but instead of reaching into her pocket to check, he reached around her and locked the passenger side door. The victim fought back. She tried to get the knife out of his hand, and in the midst of the struggle, she unlocked the door and escaped. Two sets of witnesses heard the victim crying out for help. They took down the license plate of the gold car that sped away and called the St. Paul Police Department. Officers arrived at the scene, interviewed the victim, and determined that the license plate witnesses jotted down matched a vehicle belonging to their co-worker's son. When police officers arrived at the Crosby home, they came to the door and saw Timothy Crosby on the phone, and they heard him say to the person on the other end of the line, "The police are here. I've got to go. I just tried to abduct someone." Timothy Crosby was bleeding from a deep cut to his hand. Blood was on his shirt, pants, and kitchen floor. His knife was tucked in a sheath he wore on his belt buckle. Police officers called an ambulance and searched his vehicle. Inside was a white nylon rope, 2 patches cut from a sanitary pad, a piece of blue and white cloth with a knot in it, a bone handle hunting knife, and the victim's black leather jacket. Timothy Crosby was arrested for aggravated robbery. He was taken into the St. Paul police station. The victim, at the time, worked at Charmed Unlimited in Golden Valley. Officers visited with her a few days later regarding the details of the case. The story remained the same, backed up by evidence discovered in his car and witnesses who saw her escape. Yet, charges against Timothy Crosby were dropped. This is what a St. Paul police officer wrote in the report. It was felt that Crosby would be best off back in treatment. So, he was escorted off to St. Peter Hospital again. Okay, if you're like me, you're wondering, why? Or maybe you're not wondering why. Maybe you're wondering if Timothy Crosby's father, being employed as a St. Paul police sergeant, had anything to do with the light punishments that were handed down to his son. At this point in the timeline, he's been caught twice. One included multiple counts of violent sexual assault and threats of death. The other included violence resulting in significant injuries to the victim. He also, at this point in the story, skated through as a suspect in Belinda's disappearance without a thorough investigation. Why? I have asked myself that question, and I've considered the following possibilities. It was the 1970s. There was no national or state sexual offender database. One could argue that sentencing guidelines for sexual assault convictions weren't as strict. And as far as Belinda's investigation, maybe the Wright County Sheriff and his deputies were stretched too thin to search the Crosby cabin or the farm field he got stuck in, or ask Belinda's family to look at the clothing discovered in his car before it was handed over to Glenn Crosby. It's hard to imagine anything taking precedence over a beloved missing 17-year-old girl and the quest to find her, but I've considered that possibility. Yet, I've also considered the possibility that Glenn Crosby could have had a hand in guiding his son away from due punishment and investigations, that he could have used his position as a cop in the 1970s to sway others to take it easy on his son. But I never met Glenn. I didn't observe the way he defended his son. I've read in the case file what he told neighbors about the young woman his son kidnapped and raped. And I've read a letter he wrote to his son about Belinda's case. But I wasn't there. Jim Powers was, though.
Hello,
Hi, is this Jim Powers?
that's me.
Jim Powers was a deputy for the Wright County Sheriff's Office when Belinda went missing. He became the sheriff a few years later. I've talked with a lot of people now who say Jim Powers was, in somewhat recent years, vocal around town about his theory that Timothy Crosby was likely involved in Belinda's disappearance. Here's her friend Diane telling me just that.
I ran into Jim Powers, and he was kind of a friend of the family, and I asked him about the Belinda, the case, and I don't know what year it was maybe years after this happened. And so he told me for the first time the name of Tim Crosby, and that they were certain there was circumstantial evidence that, he was likely the person that was responsible, and his theory about what happened, and also the fact that his mother or father, I thought it was mother, and somebody else said maybe it was the father, was very domineering and wouldn't allow questioning him.
Now, Jim Powers is 93 years old. I didn't expect him to remember it all, but his number was passed along to me. I heard he had a theory. And if there was one person who could give me some insight into Glenn Crosby, it was him. And he did.
I can remember going there, serving the warrant. Parents were rather hostile, as I recall.
This is Jim Powers, talking about the search warrant they executed on the Crosby family home in St. Paul in January of 1975 on behalf of the investigation into Belinda's disappearance.
The father, I can recall him not wanting to let us in the house at first, and he saw the warrant and he had to.
And as far as what he observed in terms of the relationship between Glenn and his son,
I guess my attitude, as I'm looking back at it, was that he was a father protecting his kid.
In terms of how involved Glenn Crosby was.
But he watched us, I know that.
So that gives us a little more insight into Glenn Crosby's relationship with his son and Wright County Sheriff's Office. He wanted to protect him. But what about protecting Timothy Crosby's victims from him? In 1987, Timothy Crosby, again, convinced the board at St. Peter Hospital that he no longer had any violent sexual fantasies. He was, again, released, and 1 month later was in handcuffs because a young woman escaped from Timothy Crosby. Again. On July 18, 1987, Timothy Crosby returned to a familiar area near University Avenue in St. Paul. He pulled up alongside a woman. She was walking down the street on her way to the bus stop, and he asked her if she wanted a ride. She accepted. When she was in the car, he asked her if she wanted a drink and offered her $30 to go back to his apartment. She agreed. But after one drink, she wanted to leave. And she tried to. But he grabbed her from behind and threw her to the floor. He strangled her until she lost consciousness. When she came to, her hands were tied behind her back with wire. Her feet were bound together. He had removed her clothing and placed tape over her mouth and eyes, and tied her to his bed. He repeatedly sexually assaulted her over the course of 16 hours. In her victim statement, the young woman said she was afraid to cry out because she was in fear for her life. Timothy Crosby briefly left the apartment the next day. At around 3 o'clock, when he was gone, the victim was able to free herself from the bed. She removed the cardboard from the window, smashed through the glass, and threw herself out, cutting her feet, legs, and wrists in the process. She landed in the apartment courtyard, naked, tied up, and fearing for her life. 2 men who went outside to work on a car saw it all. They took her into their apartment, cut the wire that bound her wrists and ankles, and called the St. Paul Police Department, along with an ambulance. When police arrived, the victim described the man to officers. A neighbor overheard and said, "That's Tim. He's the caretaker." Police surrounded the apartment building. Through the broken window, they could see that Timothy Crosby was on the phone with someone. And then, when he saw the officer staring back at him, he hung up. Timothy Crosby, on the phone after an abduction. Sounds familiar. He eventually surrendered. The police report states that as he was being taken away in handcuffs, he said over and over again, "She led me on." When he was in the squad car, officers noted he made the following statements. "I don't know why she did that. I thought she wanted to date. I didn't know. She knew I was going to take her back to where she wanted. She said, 'Pay me or she's going to cry rape.' Then, after staring straight ahead in silence, he continued talking, contradicting himself. He thought they were dating, but also he paid her $30. Inside the apartment laundry room, officers discovered a brown paper bag with the victim's clothes and ID, along with 1 key, a speaker wire, and 2 pieces of glass. Inside his apartment, officers discovered wire and a number of rolls of masking tape. Timothy Crosby was arrested on charges of false imprisonment and sexual assault. He was taken to the station and jailed overnight. In the morning, he told officers he talked to his father the night before, and he was going to consult with his father's attorney. Later that day, his dad arrived at the station and asked officers to hand over his son's keys to him. And they did. Glenn Crosby left with 3 keys. Timothy Crosby's lawyers worked out a deal. The false imprisonment charge was dropped, and he pleaded guilty to 3rd-degree sexual misconduct. That plea agreement also included a stipulation that the state would not file a petition to commit him as a dangerous or sexual psychopath. Timothy Crosby was sentenced to 41 months at the Minnesota Correctional Facility in Stillwater. While there, he refused sex offender treatment. His sentence was up in 1989, and he was directly transferred to St. Peter because his prior commitment had been extended another 5 years due to his actions. But he managed to get out of the stint at St. Peter after his lawyers argued that the original commitment, stemming from 1975, was based on a kidnapping conviction. Remember, the sexual assault charge was dropped. Kidnapping was no longer included in the state's list of offenses that warranted commitment. So, he was free, with no requirement to partake in sex offender treatment. And it was 1990, 1 year before the state of Minnesota enacted its sex offender registry. That new law didn't apply to those whose crimes came before 1991. So he skated through the system, at least for a while. 2 years after he left St. Peter, on May 14, 1992, BCA Special Agent Dennis Sigafus confronted him at his workplace, Builder Square in St. Paul, and told him he was investigating Belinda's disappearance and suspected murder. Sigafus told him he was the prime suspect. Here's what he wrote in his report. At this time, Crosby did not say anything but just glared. I know that glare. When I interviewed Timothy Crosby in January at the Secure Sex Offender Treatment Program facility in northern Minnesota, where he's locked up, he gave me that glare, that stare down, more than once. When I asked him questions about Belinda, when I told him he was never ruled out as a suspect in her case, and when I asked him if he had anything to do with her disappearance. Did you kill Belinda? Did you kidnap her or have anything to do with her going missing?
No. There ain't nothing I can do about anything. Can't change.
Can't change
Unless
what?
you guys find something after the fact. Somebody comes up and says, oh yeah, I was. You know what I'm trying to say? Unless somebody comes up, of course, Dwayne or Dwight can't. But did anyone even look at it? Maybe there was a family thing going on? Some of the family members might have been mad at her.
After that interview, I went back into the investigative file, and it gave me a new perspective. I witnessed what law enforcement officers throughout the years wrote in their reports. How he glared, how he downplayed his crimes, how he provided scapegoats, and blamed his victims for exaggerating. There was something else that stood out to me, too. Back in 1992, Timothy Crosby told Sigafus that a man he met at St. Peter Hospital could clear his name by providing information that Belinda was still alive. And then, Timothy Crosby asked Sigafus if he'd receive an apology when they found Belinda. He said something very similar to me, except this time, he said he was waiting for an apology from Belinda when she showed up. Now, at age 66, after decades of not talking to her close group of sisters and brothers, after missing her dad's funeral, a dad who everyone has described as a loving father, after allowing her family to grieve her death during a memorial service, and after missing the last days of her mother's life.
I hope she gets brought up on charges when she's found.
That'd be tough. That'd be real tough.
To bring her up on charges for the harm she's done?
For her to be alive.
See stuff on TV all the time.
Back in 1992, the BCA nailed down the name and address of the man Timothy Crosby referenced from St. Peter Hospital. They made some attempts to reach him, but there's no indication in Belinda's case file that they tracked him down. And maybe that's because they knew Belinda did not run away. After that 1992 BCA interview with Timothy Crosby, Belinda's case went cold again. In the following years, 2 more women went missing. One from St. Paul, the other from Minneapolis. Their remains were discovered, dismembered, in Wright County, near Eagle Lake. Timothy Crosby wouldn't become a suspect in those cases until more than a decade later. Before that happened, Wright County Sheriff's Office investigators got a tip regarding Belinda's case that took them in a different direction. A call came in, reporting what seemed to be a confession. You've been listening to The Vault, a Forum Communications podcast covering true crime in the Upper Midwest. This series is dedicated to the disappearance of Belinda Van Lith and the investigation that followed. To see documents from the case file and images of Belinda, Timothy Crosby, and others in this series, visit inforum.com/Belinda. This series is written, narrated, and produced by me, Trisha Turinskis. The Vault's editor is Jeremy Fugelberg. If you have any information related to this case, please reach out. You can find my email in the show notes. Thank you for listening.